Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Welcome to Courtside, a celebration of the spectacular moments from the U.S. Open throughout the years. A place where past champions
and I will take you and the memory of you with me for the rest of my life. Thank you.
current players
Got forehand, Sabalenka's in, cuts off a backhand volley, pass is good, and Coco Gauff, at 19 years old, is the United States Open champion.
and the sport's greatest storytellers give you a peek at life behind the net.
The person on the other end said, "Is this Mark Woodforde?" Yeah, I said, "Yes." And, "Hi, this is Martina Navratilova. I was wondering whether you'd be interested in playing doubles with me at Wimbledon." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, who is this? Who really is this?"
This is Courtside, the official podcast of the U.S. Open. Here's your host, Mark Stern.
Hello and welcome to Courtside. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we have a great show for you today. And it's been a minute since you've heard from me, and just in full confession, the reason was I had a really bad case of COVID. I mean, really bad. Couple of weeks I was on my back. I am feeling much better now. Glad to be up and running again. Make sure you get your vaccination, kids. You want to make sure you stay healthy. And to be honest, I just miss talking with all of you. So, what have we got lined up for you today? One of our favorite guests, the great Mark Woodforde, winner of 17 Grand Slam titles and a gold and silver medal in the Olympics, and one of just the best people you'll ever get to chat with. We're going to talk to him about Davis Cup, and I'll also get his thoughts on Novak Djokovic, who continues to rack up more and more records. I'll also talk with Michelle Yu about the problem-plagued WTA Finals in Cancun, the Billie Jean King Cup, and more. Maybe even ask her what her favorite dish is for Thanksgiving. So, lots to get to, but before we dive into that, let me just make a quick trip around the world of tennis. And we will begin with congratulations to the aforementioned Novak Djokovic for winning the Paris Open. Now, that's his 40th 1,000 level Masters win, which extend the record he already holds. He's now playing in the ATP Finals and the Davis Cup after that as he finishes out another outstanding year. And I will talk a lot more about him with Mark. Also, congrats to Iga Swiatek for winning the WTA Tour Finals in Cancun and for regaining the #1 spot in the world rankings. I'll talk a lot about that and what went down in Cancun with Michelle in a little bit. Also, congratulations to Canada for winning their first Billie Jean King Cup, taking out Italy in the finals. And it was a huge performance from Leylah Fernandez that helped them get there, and that was great fun to see. And I'll also dive into that with Michelle. So, with all that to get to, let's step aside, and when we come back, I'll chat with one of the all-time greats on and off the court, Mark Woodforde, as Courtside continues.
Drink Evian, the source of refreshment for your body and mind, with naturally occurring electrolytes for a cool, crisp taste. Mountain-made minerals. From alpine glacier rocks to you, Evian. Live young.
There's more to gaining advantage in tennis than a blistering serve. That's why the USTA works with Deloitte. See how we help it elevate fan experiences, advance business strategy, and more at Deloitte.com/USTA.
As a proud partner of the U.S. Open, Maestro Dobel hits a smooth serve on and off the court. As the world's first Cristalino tequila, serving an ace is as simple as making your favorite drink courtside or at home. Celebrate with Maestro Dobel tequila. Proximo, Jersey City, New Jersey.
Experience iconic Dubai with Emirates, home to soaring skyscrapers, adrenaline-fueled entertainment, and world-class shopping. Fly Emirates to Dubai and discover the unexpected. Fly Emirates. Fly better.
You're listening to Courtside, the U.S. Open podcast.
I am so thrilled right now to be welcoming one of not just the great figures in the world of tennis, but one of truly the great people you will ever get to know and chat with. I'm especially happy, as I mentioned in the Open, I am getting over a bout with COVID, and this is really the first person I've talked to since I've gotten healthy again, Mark Woodforde. It would take me too long to list all the Grand Slam majors that you won over your illustrious career. But as I said, above and beyond your enormous talent on the tennis court, as a human being, you're one of the finest people you could ever know. So it is such a thrill to have you back on the show.
Thank you. That's a very warm and a welcoming welcome to speak with you, and I'm glad that we are actually a bit of a distance apart from each other, given your recent bout, which too sorry to hear about, but it sounds like you're back to your best, and I'm glad that I'm able to chat with you and see you instead of just lying comatose down.
Right. Yes. A week ago, it would not have been this level of energy for me. So I'm happy for this. And there's lots I want to talk to you about. I guess I'll start off with the Davis Cup, because as we talk, just in full disclosure for everyone, this is Thursday night. You're headed over to Malaga, Spain for the Davis Cup this coming weekend. Mm-hmm. It's a really exciting tournament. The 8 teams or the 8 final teams, the U.S. is not part of the finals, is not going to be part of this, right, which leaves us to shoot for something, in years to come. But I guess the first question I wanted to ask you, Mark, is, and I know they changed the format a few years ago, but as I told you before we started taping, I'm old, so my head is still stuck in the old ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And yeah. I don't know, you played this, so I don't know what your perspective is, but as a fan and a spectator, I loved sort of like we're not going to do it in one location. We're going to play in hostile areas, and there's going to be this element of a crowd. I know Jimmy Arias has told me incredible stories of playing in front of hostile crowds. What's your sense of the way it used to be and the way it is now? And as a player, did you thrive on those hostile environments, or was it like, no, man, it was too crazy, I'm glad they don't do that anymore?
Thrive. I wish I had when I was playing away, but during my career, I played for Australia a number of times having to play singles and doubles. In fact, my last ever professional match was the Davis Cup finals. Against Spain, Australia against Spain. Unfortunately, it didn't go down as what I had hoped and what we had anticipated as a team. But I was not standing beside my regular partner, the Woodies. Todd, yes. Unfortunately, his wife was pregnant at the time, and so he had stepped down from playing. So I think that it affected probably me mostly. Look, when you're going into battle with standing beside someone that you have this reassuring confidence in each other, and look, our record was pretty strong as well.
Yeah, you guys were okay.
we were okay actually in Davis Cup, and to come up against the Spanish Armada, the doubles was going to play a key aspect. So, to probably highlight what you had spoken about, this home and away format and playing against hostile crowds, I think the Spanish, we played in Barcelona. It was in front of, I believe, 12,000 fans, 12,000 seat stadium. It was jam-packed. And in those days, the format had that the visiting team could only have 10% capacity of the seating of the crowd because
right.
You're the visiting team.
Right.
So 12,000, that's what, 1,200 Australian fans that they were positioned. Of course, the home team, the Spanish, they made sure that the Australian 1,200 crowd were as far away from the court as possible, up in the heavens of this magnificent stadium. So when we did the encore on day one, we did the on-court introductions. They have a ceremony. The Spanish crowd, the Spanish team were introduced. It came to the Australians, and so I think it was Pat Rafter. Our team was obviously captained by John Newcombe.
Mm-hmm. Nuke, yeah.
Pat Rafter playing that year. Leighton Hewitt in the singles, and the doubles pairing was myself and Sandon Stolle. So Sandon had been selected to replace Todd. We had played the semi-finals together, where we squeaked by a tough 5-set match in the semi-finals. So I still felt pretty comfortable standing beside Sandon, given his pedigree with the last name of Stolle. So, but to tell you what it like, the atmosphere was that as they called out John Newcombe, it was, you can imagine like a fairy clap. It's like like two fingers tapping.
Right.
But the Australian crowd tried to cheer, and they were drowned out by the Spanish booing. So that was John Newcombe. The same happened for Pat Rafter, for Leighton Hewitt, which, by the way, they were certainly inside the top 10 of rankings at the time. But just met with a chorus of booing. Sandon got named to walk out, and then me was the final name. This was my last ever match that I was playing. I was retiring after this Davis Cup final, and I walked out to just. I mean, barely could get like the little pitter patter of clap, and then it was just this loud booing. That was on day one. The actual second day, where we did play doubles, of course, when we walked onto the court, it was a kind of a psychological spear that was thrown. The crowd actually applauded Sand and Stolly as we were introduced. But when Mike was introduced, and I think this probably goes back to that, they were aware that I was the key factor in the doubles.
Right.
Playing against Alex Corretja and I think pretty much an unknown guy, Juan Barcels, who just an innocuous Spanish player that they brought in. So Sen and I, did start the favourites, but I think the crowd knew that I was the integral part. And if they could probably somehow break me, that was the advantage. So they applauded Sandon. But when my name was called out, it was this booing. And I have to say that it affected me.
Really?
Usually I was a guy that would walk onto the court. It didn't matter who I was partnering, whether it was Todd, whether it was, the time that I played with McEnroe or any of the other guys I played with. I generally would walk out into the court with a belief that I had a chance of winning. Never defeated myself before I walked onto the court.
Sure.
But on this occasion, just walking out and hearing, because I was surprised when they applauded Sandon. I thought, this is pretty fair. This is not bad.
Right.
And then to hear them booing, it deflated me for sure. I had to, Nuke kind of came out and put his arm around me and kind of, tried to lift me up, inflate me. Again, you could see that I was like, kick in the guts, that was. But every time I hit a ball in the 5-minute warm-up, I believe I was hitting with Alex Corretja. I think he played on the Juice court. So I was playing the ad court. And so I'd hit a ball to Alex, and Alex would make connection and they would applaud. And then when I would go to hit the ball, they started booing. It was just this seesawing of endless cheering and booing. And we ended up losing the match. I didn't probably play one of my best matches. A lot of credit goes to, our opponents.
Oh, sure.
But that was my final match, and it really did. Again, I'd love to be able to say in hindsight, had Todd been standing beside me, the two Woodies, that's a strong force.
It is.
Sandon probably was overly affected by the occasion, given this was a major achievement for him, but. He struggled with the whole occasion, and I probably tried to do a bit too much in order to cover for him, and of course every time I did make an error, it was met with 10,000 people cheering. So look, long story that on that one, but that's how Davis Cup was, and I it's not that I turned around and said, this has got to go down in the toilet of, where Davis Cup has got to change. That, to me, was the epitomized what Davis Cup was about. We had home away format. but probably, years later, when I was invited by the ITF, asked by the ITF to jump on board, to become a board member, and eventually become the chairman of Davis Cup, that I was already aware that Davis Cup was faltering. The format was not surviving. It was going downhill quite quickly, rapidly. The top players weren't engaged to play. They were picking and choosing when they would play. The fans weren't. So apart from the finals, where I mentioned that 12,000 fans attended the final between Australia and Spain. The year before, we had made the final Australia. We played France away. There were 10,000 fans in that stadium. But you have to look at the other matches in the build-up, and fans weren't turning up. They just, unless there were the power forces in tennis, fans just weren't, going out to play. In Australia, they did, because Australia, they love Davis Cup. In France, they're doing a magnificent effort. They love the Davis Cup. But pretty much, even here in the US, it wasn't the case. Some teams were barely getting 2,000 fans to watch a home Davis Cup tie. And of course, that impacts their ability to run it successfully. That affects their ability to pay their players to compete. And the ATP Tour has been such a successful unit over the past couple of decades now. The riches, the wealth that's available to play the ATP Tour, it makes it really difficult for a tennis player who is, whether they're inside the top 200, top 100 or top 50, to actually step off the tour to play Davis Cup, where they're not playing for ranking points. They're playing for the honor of their country, to wear your country's colors. And really the payment, the money that was available in Davis Cup was really minute. It could not compete with the ATP Tour. So it really needed an overhaul. The title sponsor, BNP Paribas, they had issued a threat to say that, we're not going to remain as the title sponsor unless there are significant changes in the format and the way that Davis Cup is played. So the ITF decided that they would have to review different formats, how it was going to be played. And there was quite a strong review, not just from national associations, but from the players as well. They had a bit of a say. And what we have, over that's been now 5 years, 6 years in effect, is really what that feedback, offered or provided for the ITF. So Mark, the home and away format is still there. Happy to point that one out to you, because I think that's a bit of a misnomer that, fans kind of think, they don't play home and away anymore. Well, yes, we do. In the first round, in week 5, which is the week after the Australian Open, the qualifying, the first round of Davis Cup is a home and away element still. But instead of playing 3 days, and instead of playing best of 5 sets, this is what the feedback was from players and from federations. They wanted to not play over 3 days. It was too much tennis. They didn't want to play 5 sets because it was too taxing, too physical in amongst the calendar. So we made those changes. But we're heading to the finals, as you say. They're starting next week. We have a knockout format, 8 teams. We call it the Final 8. And that will finish off really the tennis season. And Spain is not there. Unfortunately, we have chosen Malaga, Spain, as the host. They were hosting last year as well. And the crowds were fantastic. We've actually been tracking very well, even this year, with ticket sales without Spain there. But as you also said, no USA. They fell in the week after the US Open. We have a round robin group stage. There are 4 cities that 16 teams play a round robin format. And the US, unfortunately, went down to Finland and to the Netherlands, and so that they didn't qualify. But I've spoken to Bob Bryan. He's the new captain of Team USA, and he's very much determined to turn the ship around. And look, sometimes even as we are on tour, sometimes it needs a bit of a kick in the pants, a result that really, is it just makes you more hungry, more determined to change things. And so Bob is hoping that he can talk to the USTA in maybe that they might put a bid in to host the round robin group stage. As I said, we have 4 cities that host. There is a position for one city in 2024, a new city, to come on board and host. So he would like to be able to see if the US can maybe put a bid in, because he's got these young guns. I mean, Ben Shelton, Seb Korda, Nakashima is still hovering. Riley Opelka is just coming back onto the tour. It's great to see him back and trying to get match play. But along with Taylor Fritz, who else am I? Tommy Paul.
Francis. Yeah, Francis.
Francis Diaz. I mean, he has the Team USA is, I hope that it is hurting these guys, that they're not there, because
that's the thing.
It can turn it around, and I think we'll see Team USA, regardless of whether the USTA do put in a bid to host. I think the US team next year are going to be real threats to the Davis Cup competition.
Yeah, and thank you for walking me through all of that. And I'm an old codger, so I'm perpetually thinking, oh, things were better when I was younger, and it's not always the case, and those changes needed to be made. It is funny when you talk about the incentives for players to play and the financial consideration not being, remotely what it is on regular tour events. And I get all of that, but again, I hearken back to when I was a kid and hearing John McEnroe talk about how important Davis Cup was, because he learned that from Arthur Ashe, and these are two of the greatest figures. And so the idea of we're representing our country, I know that means an awful lot to every player that gets the opportunity to do it, but there has to be an evolution of the tournament, and what you all have done, I think has worked brilliantly.
Well, look, we're still navigating the waters. There was this group, Cosmos, led by Gerard Piqué, one of the soccer greats, played for Barcelona and for Spain for many years. So his company came on board and signed a massive financial deal with the ITF. And I think there was a lot of questions being thrown towards the ITF that, this is just absurd that you would sign such a massive deal, and for all of this money, where does the money go? And that's what's important, is the money that is generated by the Davis Cup competition gets 90% of that income gets redistributed to 200 plus nations, member nations of the International Tennis Federations. There are 4 Grand Slams, as you know, Mark. I'm not trying to educate you, but for some of the people that maybe are listening in, I think there are 205 nations that belong to the ITF. Only 4 of them are Grand Slams, but those 4 Grand Slam nations, Australia, France, the LTA, Wimbledon, and here in the US, they generate so much money from their own Grand Slam. They actually don't need the financial support of the ITF, but there are 200 plus nations that rely upon the money that is dispersed of what the Davis Cup produces, and they use that in ways to begin grassroots programs within their own country. Right. They don't all have millions and millions of dollars filtering in from hosting tournaments. Some of them, you think of some African nations, even some Eastern European nations, some Asian nations, small little islands. They really rely upon this money, and it might be just even to put in tennis courts. so that they can, foster some talent. Maybe some of those funds will go towards hosting a challenger event or a futures level tournament. It doesn't have to be, that money allocated to these federations doesn't have to be used in a specific way, but it all goes into grassroots tennis. And if there was not grassroots tennis in all of the tennis nations, we don't get to see the Roger Federers, the Novak Djokovic, the Nadals, the Tiafos, the Tommy Pauls. So I do think the ITF gets a hard knock. They get blasted for changing the competition, but it needed to. If we didn't change the competition, there would be no Davis Cup. And I think we see already these other competitive team events like the Laver Cup, like the Nations Cup that is played in Australia. They are competitors to the Davis Cup. The Laver Cup is a lot wealthier. The reason that the top players play that event is because they get paid a boatload of money to play. Right. The Nations Cup, they get paid a boatload of money, plus they play for ranking points. So that's the hook. For Davis Cup, the hook is playing for the honor of your country. And that's not always reliable as it used to be in my generation. And you mentioned John McEnroe, Arthur Ashe. You can go back even further into history in a lot of countries. And back in those days as well, they weren't having to fight for tournaments. There wasn't the depth. There wasn't the plethora of tournaments that there is now. That, we can't say that it's a bad thing that the ATP is a real financial corporation now, because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be successful.
Exactly.
They're putting on tournaments galore, and their money is increasing, which is fantastic for players. But it in some ways it does affect. It can affect Davis Cup and whether players decide to play for a smaller amount of money, but it's for the honor of wearing their country's colors, or do they sacrifice maybe some income and maybe try to bankroll the rest of their year and build their ranking up? It's a tough choice for some players.
No, it is. But there's a lot in there that struck me very strongly. And I think particularly you talk about the money spreading throughout other nations around the country, around the world, rather, who are trying to generate interest in tennis and develop players. And you have to start those grassroots movements. And I'm thinking, just off the top of my head, two players come to mind, and one is Ons Jabeur, who comes from an area that is not traditionally known for tennis at all, and you see what she has done as a player on and off the court and how inspiring she is. So 10 years from now, she's going to be inspiring players that we don't even know
Massively.
yet. And think of a little kid born in Serbia named Novak Djokovic. You never would say, oh, well, that's a hotbed for tennis. Yeah, that's a guy that's a place that's going to breed like maybe the greatest player of all time. And so you never know where that spark is going to be lit in a player, and seeing these tournaments in front of you can be that spark for so many young players across the globe. And that's why that work, I think, is so important.
It can be, and you highlight two very key countries there. Serbia, when you think of yes, it's Novak, but Ana Ivanovic has come from Serbia. Janko Tipsarevic, Dusan Vemic, Nenad Zimanic. They have Miomir Kecmanovic. That's at the moment. Laszlo Djere. I mean, they have been able to have a history of players now that perhaps say 20 years ago. I'm trying to think of a Serbian player that I remember Slobodan Zivojinovic.
Oh, sure.
But he might have set that tone. He might have, just for him to be playing for what used to be Yugoslavia, that set dreams alight. That might have helped create the players of today, and even Tunisia. I have to say, I commend the Tunisian Federation and their president, Salma Merni, who is part of the ITF. She's on the board as well. But that's where that money that is generated from Davis Cup that is distributed out to federations like Tunisia. They run a succession of future levels tournaments throughout the year. We call them resort series tournaments, and they run 6 weeks almost back to back, but it provides players, it cuts down their costs. They can stay in one resort for potentially 6 weeks in a row where everything is inclusive, but they're $15,000 events. Sometimes they go up to $25,000 events.
Right.
That's the total prize money available, but they're back-to-back weeks, and it just allows players to minimalize their overhead costs. And it's the same for on the women's side as well. The women's game that they are producing those types of levels of tournaments out, and there we go. We have the birth of someone like Ons Jabeur.
Yeah, who is just such a pure joy to watch, and has the greatest nickname on tour, the Minister of Happiness, because everybody that meets her, and I have not had the good fortune to chat with her, but I know I'm going to adore her the second I do, because she just beams confidence and charisma, and is such an enormously talented player, whom I have said many times before, I am convinced is going to win multiple majors. I think she has that kind of talent.
I hope so. I think that would probably be the next. I'm sure that's what she's focused on.
Sure.
Already the impact for the success that she's enjoyed, and her life is so enriched as a tennis player now to be able to travel the world. Look, we all started from not much.
Yeah. Well, you pick up a racket, and everybody's stories. I mean, everybody I've talked to is like, I was hitting against a picnic table, and I was, there wasn't really a court, and we had to drive an hour to get to it, or everybody had a different path. And it was the love of the game that really burned brightly and people. And then you never know where that's going to take you. I mean, look at the journey that you've been on. I mean, all the places that you've played and that you've been, and that the amazing accomplishments that you've had. When you first picked up a racket, and I don't know how old you were when you did, to go from there to here is just an incredible journey.
It is a journey that at times you probably you might look at it and think, this is just it's not always not always smelling the roses. And at the time you may say, this is just like diabolical. How am I going to get through this? But it's perseverance. It tests it tests the values that if you're going to become a champion tennis player, that those values need to be tested along the way. And I know that I can look back and very fondly at my career, and with this the success on the singles court and the doubles court. But I probably and I don't want to make it that it's easy to say now because of what you've ended up achieving, but I think I look back most fondly in those early years where I really struggled, and I was blessed to be in a team of other guys that were experiencing the same, that they were trying to make it as a professional tennis player. The fact that we had no money, that we had to choose certain restaurants because there would be families, Italian restaurants, pizzerias that had food left over and they left after paying the bill, and that we would reach over and sneak a couple of slices of pizza before the staff of the restaurant would clear it. It's those moments that you just think, at the time, I can't believe that we're going through this. But I tell you, it was some funny moments, and so it's not all about that. The most enjoyable part is when you're holding the trophy. Yes, there are good times, but I look back and I think those first few years, heck, they were what a ride that was.
My first year, and I know this is apples to oranges, but it's in essence the same. So let me dive into this. My first year in radio, I was working in an unrated market in Lake Winnipesaukee, New Hampshire, where there was like 14 people who lived there. And I think I made something like $12,000 like the whole year, like barely enough money to pay rent and buy groceries.
Come on, that was wealthy.
No, and I look back on those days and you're working like 20 hours a day, and it was the most fun I have ever had broadcasting. It was those early days where you're sort of on the edge and you're like, I'm doing this because I love it. And yeah, there's a lot of hard times where you're like, why am I doing this? This is impossible. And you look back though, and that it was the perseverance to like battle through those tough times. And listen, I'm not an award-winning broadcaster by any stretch of the imagination, but I look back at the breadth of my career and I'm like, those were the days that were really the most fun for me.
And did you have to do that solo as well?
Yeah. I did a 5-hour solo show as a DJ. Yeah. And then we did all these live events, and it was, I don't even know when I slept or ate, you just didn't have time. But it was like, I look back and that was real broadcasting. And those are the greatest days. And I've been afforded unbelievable opportunities to do great things, but I always go back to those early days. I think anybody, and by the way, if we had Paul McCartney here and we talked to him about the Beatles in the early days playing in Hamburg and, when they were making no money, they didn't know what their future was going to be. I guarantee you that he would say those were the greatest days.
Right. Yeah.
You know? Well, let me turn to and I don't want to keep you here for 4 hours, even though I could talk to you for 4 hours. Mark, but
we're probably going on a tangent that maybe you didn't really want to go there. So.
No, it's brilliant. But let me just ask you quickly about Djokovic, because we've mentioned him a couple of times here, and he just wins in Paris. That's his 40th 1,000 Masters win. And he's in all likelihood going to end the year as the world number one. I think he has to win one match in the APT Tour Finals, and Alcaraz would have to sweep everything, and Djokovic would have to get completely shut out, and that would be, I think, the eighth time he would finish number one at the end of the year. The records keep piling up for him. In fact, he hasn't lost a match since he lost that brilliant finals at Wimbledon to Carlos Alcaraz. And just when you think, okay, well, Father Time is undefeated, he's going to start beating up on Novak Djokovic, he continues to have amazing years and doesn't really show signs of slowing down. We've been blessed to have players like Roger Federer and Rafa Nadal, and now we have the prospect of Carlos Alcaraz and a lot of other young, super talented players. But boy, when it's all said and done, it feels like Djokovic is just going to be on his own island of like, man, you just can't believe all the accomplishments he's racked up.
It's breathtaking, isn't it?
It is.
It is. It's phenomenal, and I don't know if there is enough superlatives, not in certainly my dictionary, to come up to really aptly describe his achievements. And but Mark, you talked about that Wimbledon match, and he was so close to actually winning that match. I felt like that was probably, and it's not to be harsh on him, but that's the blip in the year.
Yeah,
and I felt like that he had that match in his hands, and maybe I felt like he showed vulnerable moments in that match, and he wasn't able to reset. And we talk about these great players, the reason why they win in these pressure moments, big matches, and when they do face adversity. We all face adversity in these big matches, Grand Slams or winning for major titles, but the top players, they're able to reset quickly. He didn't seem to reset fast enough in that final with Alcaraz. But look, if he had actually ended up winning, I mean, gosh, what were we saying about the year already? It's incredible. I did watch a bit of the final in Paris. But kind of got up. I woke up earlier than the normal, but it allowed me to watch a bit of the second set. And the stat that the commentators were discussing that for me is that is he 35, 36 years of age? And I think everyone else in the top 20, I believe it was, is under 27 years of age.
That's,
for someone that, myself, my last year of playing, I was 35 years old. I'd let my singles go. I only really played singles for half the year, but was still very competitive on the doubles court. But it was just catching up with me. And, look, I'm not elevating myself into the echelon of Novak Djokovic on the singles court, but on the doubles court, I mean, it's not as physically taxing by any means, but I was feeling it physically at 35. And here's this guy that has kept himself in supreme shape. And it doesn't look like that he's, so again, turned adversity. We spoke about the Team USA maybe losing earlier in the Davis Cup rounds, not coming out of the round robin group, and that might have a positive effect. Perhaps the Wimbledon result has had a positive effect for Novak to just churn out this amazing back end of the season. Look, he can pick and choose now where he wants to play. To prime himself to play. I wonder whether he is aware of all of these records. And again, I go back to, for Todd and I, and it's not just to say that, but because it does happen with great champions. We would walk in the last couple of years of playing after winning a tournament, and it was the media that would say, if you win, 2 more tournaments, you've got the record for such and such. And if you win 1 more match here, you get elevated into the history books. I think after, for a certain period of time, that's what when you've been around long enough, that's what you are trying to achieve. I mean, we wanted to be number 1. We wanted to be year-end number 1. We wanted to accumulate more slams because that's what we read in the history books. How many tournaments you win, how many wins, how many slams, etc. Whether he's aware of all of these records, but I think he's the main one for me is the fact that he's cleared out ahead of Roger and Rafa now with slams, and I don't see them matching him in that area, and I think that's what really is setting him apart, along with. It's like kind of icing on the cake with all of these other, 8 ATP finals, however many matches it is. I mean, it's just every category. He's there. He's got his hands on them.
Yeah. I mean, it's like Tiger Woods, Babe Ruth, Michael Jordan, like all wrapped into one, just every Wayne Gretzky, all these insane records that he just keeps piling up. And I think you're right. I think the loss at Wimbledon, I think that did recharge his batteries. Not that he needs a lot of motivation, but I saw it in that final. I think it was in Cincinnati against Alcaraz. It was an epic final, and you could see it was like 2 heavyweight fighters just throwing haymakers at each other. And it wasn't a grand slam, but it was, still a very important tournament, but you could tell how much it mattered to Novak to win that match, to get redemption against Carlos. And it was just winning that moment. It wasn't like I need to win this because this will be my 39th 1,000 level win or whatever. It was like I need to win because I need to win. And that's a hallmark of a great champion. I got 2 things.
It's there every time. It doesn't matter the tournament. That when he steps out, his goal is to, look at being perfection is sometimes that can send you astray. We're always trying to achieve perfection on the tennis court, not make an error. Try to get, near 100% of first serves into play. These stats aren't really achievable, but it does keep us, focused. And boy, it's certainly keeping Novak focused as, I think he really, really feels like that he has a couple of years left to churn these magnificent results out.
Well, I've got 2 last things for you. One will be very quick. In case people have not recognized your voice, which they should, from the show open that we have, I don't think I told you this. I used a clip of you explaining how Martina Navratilova called you up that one time? You were like, no, who is this really? No, honestly, who is this? It's one of my favorite stories of all time. So I just want to make sure I reminded people of that. And I'm springing this on you, Mark, so I apologize for this. I've done something different here in the last couple of shows where and you're familiar with like the Mount Rushmore question, who are your top 4 people of whatever category? Who is your Mount Rushmore of tennis players? I'm assuming we're going to put Djokovic on that, but who would your Mount Rushmore of tennis players be? And feel free to put yourself up there because you certainly have the accomplishments. I know you won't. I'm just going to say that you could because you're that good.
Well, yeah, for me probably is Djokovic, and I think that's I've said for a number of years, and I'm blessed because I do get to commentate at the Grand Slam, so I get to a wonderful view of how this is all evolving and playing out. And I probably would have said Federer a number of years ago. For me, he's easy on the eye. His game as well is probably there's a synergy with the way Australians played. He kind of had it all. But I'm a huge Rafa fan as well, and there was the way that he has the accomplishments at Roland Garros.
It's astonishing.
It's just that's and now Djokovic, and I think that's the tie break, because what I'm trying to get to, the tie break for me is the accumulation of Grand Slams, that these 3 have come up in the same era, battling each other. And it seems like Djokovic is going to end up with the most, and I think that sets it apart for me. Rod Laver, of course, is
he's got to be there, right?
He's got to be up there. I rely upon him. I was probably too young to see him play at his height. And so I base that on, the information that I'm told from other Australians who, when Australian tennis ruled men's tennis in the golden era.
Well, he was as good as it gets. I mean, you went 2 Grand Slams. I mean, for all 4 in 1 year, you do it twice. I mean, that's kind of hard to top. And he was just, and like you, I was too young to watch him play at his height, but I've seen the film. I've heard people talk, and he was as great as it gets for me. And I know we're leaving an awful lot of great players off there. Arthur, John Newcomb, yes. I mean, there's Fred.
Lou Hode is in Australian mindset. Lou Hode was that there's a lot of older players that feel it's unfair not to mention Lou Hode, but there are some other great players, but Rod Laver's probably personality-wise far and above Roger, Rafa, and Novak. I mean, the guy is the greatest of all time. I was even talking about this at dinner the other night with some friends who know Rod Laver, and we were just saying about, like, I mean, can you come across a nicer guy when you're walking around and people are like literally frothing at the mouth? He comes the greatest of all time, and they even after, I mean, gosh, Rocket is now mid 80s years of age, and everyone still talks about him being potentially arguably the greatest of all time. But he walks around like, he's just a regular Joe. I mean, it is testament.
That's great.
Yeah, I get uncomfortable when pundits will say, "Oh, the Woodies." Certainly, I'm actually just quite okay to be. It's nice to be put into a group as to be considered of one of the better teams around. But the idea, it's like the greatest. It's like, I know it just seems uncomfortable. But Rocket, like, it doesn't faze him at all, and you never get a big chest pump out of him. Like, he never steps up and kind of acknowledges, yeah, I am, I was type of thing. So, but he's phenomenal. On the flip side, I do want to say, even because you mentioned about the 2 Grand Slams that Rocket won, on the women's side, I think, there's obviously Margaret Court that still has the lead as far as Grand Slams, tally of Grand Slams. But I think you've got to recognize if there has been someone that's won the Grand Slam, the calendar Grand Slam.
Sure, Steffi, yeah.
And Steffi. And I feel like she gets unfairly placed down lower, that there isn't enough recognition. The fact that she, in 88, won the slam along with the Olympic gold.
Yeah, she gets the Golden Slam. You can't have a better year than that. Yeah.
And that, I think, if Rafa came back and played in 2024 and won the Grand Slam, that for me I would be saying he's the greatest of all time.
Sure.
That is the ultimate tiebreak for me. Next is the accumulation of amount of individual Grand Slams, the tally of Grand Slams. So, I guess I'm leading into saying that for me, Steffi, I think even though it's Margaret Court that has 24 Grand Slam titles to her name, for me, Steffi is really the one that I think should be considered the greatest of all time. And I know here in this country with Serena's record,
sure, Chrissy and Martina, I mean with Billy,
Billy, they're all up there. I just, it's hard. It is difficult to individualize when there are so many greats with a list of achievements. But that's what makes it all very interesting chat between us. But
it does.
I think for me, Steffi, probably I played mixed doubles with Martina. I was blown away how amazing she was on the doubles court. So, for her to achieve singles, doubles, and mixed at some of the slams, she probably is the greatest athlete of all time.
Astonishing. Yeah.
Steffi on the singles court, I think, given she gets my nod because she's won the calendar slam.
Well, I'm not going to argue with any of that. What I will add this, Mark, just for your benefit, you and Rocket, by the way, attribute to not just your amazing country of Australia, but the amazing tradition of tennis in Australia, which is such a rich and deep history, and you are such a bright part of that. And on any,
I thought it was just red hair and freckles and fair skin and being left-handed.
Oh, you gingers, you guys are great.
Yeah, that's right. I thought it was all of that. It's not. Are you telling me? Have I been really brainwashed?
Well, you are on my Mount Rushmore of great human beings. Mark, it is always such a treat to get to catch up with you. Thank you so much. Safe travels over to Spain. Enjoy the tennis over there, and I'll be talking to you soon.
Always good talking to you. Take care.
Mark, I know I didn't get to half what I wanted to talk to you about, but it didn't matter. That was it was so fun.
I'm sorry we took that we spent a bit of time talking about Davis Cup, which I didn't mean to.
It was great. It was such a great dive into that. I haven't had that conversation with anybody, and you're the perfect person to talk about that with. And it's just great. This show to me is about great conversations, and that was with you. It always is. So, I know I'm prone to hyperbole with my praise of people, but I'm being utterly sincere. You are just a gem of a human being, and I'm always thrilled when I get to talk to you, man. You're the best.
That's kind of you. That is very kind of you, and it bounces back as well. Obviously, when things run smoothly, when you're doing these types of conversations, and to be able to just make it smooth. You're leading the way there. So thank you.
You make it easy. So thank you so much. Have a great night. As I said, safe travels, and I'll talk to you soon, man. Take care.
Hey, you keep staying healthy, and we'll see you around the traps, huh?
All right, take care, man. Be well.
Thanks, man.
So great talking with Mark. He really is one of the best people you'll ever get to meet. And it's hard to argue with his take on Rod Laver and Steffi Graf. We're both about as great as you can be in this sport. Still to come, my conversation with Michelle Yu about the WTA Finals and more. That's next here on Courtside.
Missed that play? AI didn't. The U.S. Open used AI built with Watson X to generate highlight commentary for all 254 singles matches in real time. Learn more at ibm.com/US Open.
At IHG Hotels and Resorts, we believe you should travel like you mean it. So turn your travel up a notch with 19 brands and our award-winning loyalty program, IHG One Rewards. When you have over 6,000 global destinations to choose from, you can make every getaway the best one yet. So what are you waiting for? Across 100 plus countries, IHG Hotels and Resorts is there to help so you can travel like you mean it. Get inspired and book now at ihg.com.
Play safe in the sun with La Roche-Posay Ultralight Sunscreen. It blocks up to 98% of UVB rays and helps prevent visible sun damage with UVA UVB protection and antioxidants. La Roche-Posay, the official sunscreen of the U.S. Open.
This is Courtside, the U.S. Open podcast.
Well, we're rolling into the holiday season, and I always think about friends and family. And the great thing about this show is my friends are my family. Michelle, I consider to be family. It is so great seeing your face right now. I know we're a little bit ahead of Thanksgiving, but I hope you're in that holiday spirit. And as I mentioned a couple of times on the show, I'm still getting over COVID, so I'm in a holiday spirit just because I'm up on live and walking around. So it is just doubly great to see you right now, Michelle.
Always great to see you, Mark. You're just in time after you're recovering from COVID for the turkey and stuffing. So you're still doing great. You're still winning at life.
I know. And by the way, I have to apologize. If you hear a noise in the background, that is my cat, Butch, who has found a noisy toy that he feels like playing with. Doesn't want to play with it 23 hours out of the day, but when Pop is recording, that's when Butch wants to play. So I apologize if you hear noises in the background. Let me jump into things. And because I was sick and I didn't get to do the show a couple of weeks ago, I haven't really had a chance to talk about the WTA Finals in Cancun. And there's a lot to unpack with that. First of all, congratulations to Iga Swiatek. She wins that. And really, it's a nice way for her to finish up the year. I think, she went out earlier than she wanted to at the US Open. And I think this is a way for her to right the ship. But I think the larger story from that tournament, Michelle, was all the issues with the court conditions. I guess they were working on completing construction on the court the day before the tournament started. And then the proximity to the Billie Jean King Cup, which just finished up this past weekend, which we'll get into in just a second. That a lot of players were like, I can't get over to Spain because I'm in Mexico. It's basically at the same time. So let's start off with Iga and your thoughts first about her winning.
Well, I think Iga Swiatek showed, why she's the number one player in the world. And I think, she steamrolled over Jessica Pegula. She actually after she won the match, Jessica Pegula, I think one of her Instagram posts was, ending the season going to the Iga bakery and getting steamrolled, and here I am, and I had a great year. But Iga's Iga, she's so solid. I'm not surprised by her coming up on top. I know she fell short at the US Open, but guys, we still have to think about that. She still won a Grand Slam this year. We still can't sit here and say Iga Swiatek had a bad year. She had a great year. As opposed to the tournament itself, it was a bit of a chaotic tournament. I think it was a little bit of an ugly showing, for those in the WTA, and unfortunate matters, happening. The court, Mark, not being built in time. Are you kidding me? First of all, there was so much talk around the US Open where the WTA finals would be. They decided in September that it was going to be in Cancun, not Saudi Arabia. Well, how can you make a world-class event for a women's sports in tennis, make that decision so late? So first of all, that was already a disaster in the making, a red flag, I think, over there. But then when you go there, the players arrive. There's only 8 players, by the way. This is not like a big tournament. It's 8
It's not 128 players. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this is the best in the world. The top 8 players in the world are going to this. You cannot show women disrespect. I'm not even talking about women. Even if this was a men's tournament, it would be
the athletes. Yeah.
So I think, that right there, terrible. You get there, the women get there, they can't practice because the venue is not ready. Are you kidding me, Mark? That is a disgrace on so many levels. I don't blame Arina Sabalenka, Elena Rybakina. I think Maria Sakkari, Ons Jabeur, all of them, Iga, they all came out to voice their concern, their feel of disrespect, having that tournament be the way that it was. And unfortunately, the WTA, the higher ups have to kind of now sit back and take that backlash.
Well, and I think, and it seemed like every player was like, what is going on with this? The uncertainty of the location. And then when you get there, just as you said, like they're working construction. It's almost like the paint is still drying and you're like, are we okay to step on the court? What's going on here? And for an event like that, where it is the eight best players in the world, you really need to have that buttoned up like now for next year just to take it out of play. And that seems to me like that would be an easy fix. Like, let's settle on a place. Let's make sure that, whenever Billie Jean King Cup is or whatever, that we're not stacking it right next to each other. Or if we are, it's going to be in France so that people can get to Spain without too much of an issue or something like that. And I know the WTA has publicly admitted, they're like, look, there were a lot of problems with this. We were taking player feedback and tournament, officials feedback, and we're going to fix this, make sure it doesn't happen again. You have to take them at their word, I guess, that it won't. But boy, everything about that tournament, just nothing went well, and they're better than that. I mean, the bar should be high for a tournament like that and for that phase of the year. And I think all the parties responsible are aware of that. And I'd be stunned if they had these kind of issues moving forward. Do you think that's fair?
I mean, I certainly hope that there are no issues and they've learned from this, because this was a perfect storm. Not only was the venue not ready, but it was also a weather issue. Apparently this time of the year in Cancun, it storms all the time. I don't know if you followed a lot of these posts, because a lot of colleagues that I know, were working that tournament. They were saying it was raining every single day at some point. So if the weather is going to be like that, if it's going to be hurricane season or something like that in a part of the world, you don't hold an outdoor tennis tournament there. I'm disappointed about the thought process that went into this, that people really didn't look into this. And I don't blame the players feeling disrespect at the highest level, because they feel disregarded. They feel like you didn't put any thinking into this when you planned this.
Yeah. And if you saw me smiling there, it's not for the troubles that everyone's been going through, but I never go on vacation, and I finally said I'm going to go on vacation, and I booked a trip to the Bahamas. Actually, it was St. Kitts, and I booked it right in the middle of hurricane season. So I got to St. Kitts, which was stunningly beautiful. And I was there for like 5 days, and I think, or maybe 7 days. And like 5 of the 7 days, I had to stay in my hotel because things were shut down because there were hurricanes and tropical storms. And you're like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't come here then. And once you learn that lesson, you're like, yeah, I'm not going to go to the islands at this particular time of year. So hopefully the WTA has learned what we call the Stern lesson, which is don't travel to nice places during the rainy season.
No, for sure. And I'll end it with this, because I was real riled up about this topic, talking to friends about this. Imagine, Mark, you're in the broadcasting business. Imagine a brand new studio was built for you, but nothing was tested. No audio was tested. No lights were tested. Nothing was tested. And you were expected to make your debut at a new studio right on the dot on that day, but it was going in cold. Would you be happy about it?
Not only would I not be happy, I wasn't happy when that happened several times in my career. And this is no joke, Michelle. When we went to a new radio station at one point, they just pushed us in. They're like, we got to go. We got to go. The door was broken, so you couldn't even close the door to the studio. And it was like, what are we doing here, man? So yeah,
frustrating.
Yeah, and you do feel disrespected, and you're like, what is this? We're in a top market. Like, come on, like we should have stuff that works, and we should have a game plan. So I hope that they are making those plans now. And if they need me to go do some scouting work in Cancun, I'm happy to do that for months and on end. But I'm
going to join you.
Yes. Well, you know what will be the fact-finding commission, right? Michelle and Mark. That's the deal. So we obviously mentioned Billie Jean King Cup, which finished up as we were talking here on Monday, the 13th. That finished up yesterday, and it was the second year in a row we had a first-time winner, with Canada winning. Last year it was Switzerland. And I'm not going to lie, I know I should be impartial with all the players, but I've always loved Leylah Fernandez. That magical run she had, losing to Emma Raducanu in the finals a couple of years ago at the Open, and her wonderful speech, which I actually got to talk to her about this past year when I was like, Leylah, I still get chills from that speech. It was amazing. You're going to be loved here for all time. It was great to see her do well. It was great to see Canada do well. I mean, I'm sorry the United States didn't go further, but what a great win for Leylah and for Team Canada, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Canadian women, I should correct myself, have really put themselves on the map. The Canadian men are already on the map with so many top players in the world. And I think Leylah Fernandez is the story here, isn't it? I mean, 2021 US Open finalist, as you mentioned, and here she is leading the way, not dropping any of her matches in the Billie Jean King Cup finals there, and just becoming this leader. And I think it gives her career a whole new renaissance. She's reborn in a way, I think, to me. I think it gives her a lot of confidence. She actually said, winning this has given me a lot of confidence. And I think we should see a bigger, brighter version of Leylah Fernandez, hopefully the one that we saw in 2021, in 2024. I think this really helped her in so many ways. But, another player that really helped them win this title is someone that no one knows about, 18-year-old Marina Staucic. She had never played a WTA singles match this whole year, Mark. She
That's right. That's right.
Played at the ITF, won, I think, 3 titles, but had never even known about the competition at the WTA level. Comes out, beats a top 50 player, Martina Trevisan, and a couple of other players in the top 100. She was a key part in helping Canada win. And of course, Gabby Dabrowski, doubles specialist in Canada. She obviously contributed to that as well. So all in all, amazing weekend for Canada as a whole, and definitely telling the world that this is our moment and we're here to stay.
It's amazing when a player does get that win, and that confidence under their belt, and how that can transform, their entire outlook on, the coming season or coming tournament or whatever it is. It puts them in such a different mindset. And, we've seen it with like Chris Eubanks. You get a little success and, all of a sudden, and a lot of players like that, where you're like, you get that first hit and you're like, okay, now I can do this and I can play on this level with these people. And to see Leylah get that back would just be tremendous, because she's a very special player, and she's got a huge heart. And for her to get that win, and for Canada, as you said, the Canadian women who, listen, they've had their own great tradition. I know the Canadian men have done really well, but I mean, Bianca Andreescu a couple of years ago winning the US Open. So, it's great to see them. When I always love first time winners, I just think that that's such a great experience. And for people who are like, well, why didn't the United States go further? Well, because our top players were in Cancun and couldn't make it over. And that's part of the issue with this. And that's, if you want the best players to be playing in your tournaments, you have to get the logistics worked out. Sorry, WTA, I didn't mean to slam you one more time. It just had to bring that up. Well, it's funny, as we talk about Leylah Fernandez regaining confidence and how that could play out for in the coming year. There's another player who's coming back who is making a lot of headlines, and that's Naomi Osaka. And I guess she's going to open up in Brisbane, and before she gets to the Australian Open itself. She won that tournament twice. She won the US Open twice. That's no small achievement to have 4 Grand Slam titles in your back pocket. But she very, very famously had a lot of mental health issues where it seemed like she just was not enjoying herself on or off the court. Take some time off. She's now a mother. Congratulations on that. I think it's amazing. She's another one of like female players who are mothers who are playing on tour. And I expect her to do well, but I'm not putting my expectations of like, oh, she's going to be a favorite to win this thing. I think the way Sabalenka has been playing, I think Coco Gauff getting the win at the US Open and taking herself to another level, Iga Swiatek, who we just talked about, and these are just 3 players who are playing at such a high level. I don't know what to expect of Osaka. What do you expect?
I agree with you, Mark. I think Naomi Osaka, everybody knows that she's a fantastic player. She can hit the ball and has quite the game. But, obviously in the past couple of years, I think, as you mentioned, her mental health issues have, taken over a bit more. I would like her to come back and fight through all that. And, she's a new mom now. So I'm going to be looking at this in an optimistic way. I'm a mom myself. I'm always rooting for moms to go back to their careers and excel and do well. And I think when she looks at other moms like Elena Svitolina, Victoria Azarenka, Caroline Wozniacki, who made her comeback
What a
around
run
the
that
US
was.
Open. I think she should be inspired and feel encouraged that she can come back and still be able to win and win at a very high level. Does she have a game to win at a very high level? Absolutely. And is Australia a great place for her to start her comeback after having a baby, after coming, I think it's been 6 months now. I think absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see how she comes out. People are excited to obviously see her back on the court again. I am too. I've always loved watching her play. She has a great game, big game. But again, as you mentioned, there's a lot of off the court issues. I think there were some issues, I think, with her baby daddy, Corday. This is just me with my gossip stuff that I read, Mark. So, pardon all the listeners who judge me because I watch and listen to tennis gossip. But I there were some issues. I think she had tweeted, I just want to, share the sunset or something with someone. And then people thought, oh my goodness, is there trouble with Corday after the baby was born? But then Corday liked one of her Instagram posts, Mark, and then all of a sudden things were okay again. This is how life is nowadays. In social media. But anyhow, I just hope that everything is going great for Naomi Osaka. I'm really looking forward for her return.
Yeah, she's one of the greats, and I hope that she can play at that level that she was playing at when she left. And she's still very young. It's not like, when Bjorn Borg left and it came back like 15 years later, and you're like, man, we have no idea what to expect. And oh, you're playing with a wooden racket still, Bjorn. Maybe you need to adjust to the times. Like, there isn't that huge layoff. But I think if people are expecting her to like roll through tournaments like she was at her height, I think they need to check themselves because of the stellar play of those people I just mentioned, and a few more like Ons Jabeur and Maria Sakkari, who really kind of turned it around at the end of the season, and Jessica Pegula. There's and Rybakina. There's just so many tough players at the top of the heap that
hungry. Jessica Pegula, Ons Jabeur, they're still hungry for that Grand Slam success, and Ons Jabeur, was on the cusp of it a couple of times. And for her to kind of, know that it's still there and people are encouraging her. Kim Kleister is encouraging her because she was in the same boat. I think a lot of players that are hungry to win. So it's not that easy to come back on the tour and say, hey, I'm going to dominate again.
Yeah, but it will be one of the fascinating storylines to that tournament when it gets going in just a couple of months. Before I let you go, just a couple of things. One, I know you wanted to talk about Carlos Alcaraz, who is in the ATP Tour Finals in Turin right now. As we speak, he is locked in a match with Alexander Zverev, and I'm looking at this right now. They split the first two sets. Alcaraz took the first set in a tiebreak, then Zverev 6-3 in the second. From what I can see, it appears Zverev is up a break, serving at 3-2 and up 30-15. Boy, that's as up to date as I can get you. And as we talked before we started rolling here, the interesting thing from Alcaraz is, and I did not know this, or I didn't think of it, but when you mentioned it, it totally came into picture for me. After he lost to Djokovic in Cincinnati in that epic match, he really hasn't been the same.
I will tell anyone that listens, Mark, that Cincinnati Open match, that Masters 1000 match, not the US Open, that Masters 1000 match final was a game changer for the second half of the season here for Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic. Novak Djokovic has not lost since then. He lost at Wimbledon. Carlos Alcaraz beat him there. Everyone was saying this is now the Carlos Alcaraz show for the rest of, time. Djokovic is done.
Yeah.
Well, quite the opposite. Djokovic looks like he's going to win another 12 Grand Slams the way he's looking and playing right now. And he's just beating up on the young guys. It's kind of crazy how that turned around. But Alcaraz, getting back to him, he's lost 4 matches now since that Cincinnati match, which he lost to Djokovic in a tiebreaker. It was about 4 hours, that match.
It was the best.
Amazing.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. You were there. That, just watching on TV, my heart was like pounding out of my chest the whole time. It was as thrilling a final as you'll ever watch. It was fantastic.
He had match point. He had match point, lost it. And I think he lost his concentration after he saw something over the net with Djokovic, that Djokovic may have been hurt, but that's Djokovic's MO. You can't give him an opening. You
Nope.
give him that opening, and then that's it. So he lost that match, went on to the U.S. Open, lost to Medvedev. Then he lost to Sinner at the China Open. Then he lost to Dimitrov in Paris. And then he lost again to Roman Safin recently. So I just think that, he lost to Safin in Paris and lost to Dimitrov in Shanghai.
Oh,
so
yeah, that's right. Yes.
I just think it's one of those things where he hasn't recovered from that. I think he's lost a little bit of his concentration. I think he wasn't 100% physically as well. I hope he takes some rest. I don't know how he's going to do in this ATP finals. Losing, I just think it's a concentration and a focus lapse a bit for him. Down 4-2 now, as I update you, Mark, on this group stage match against Zverev. So I just think, he needs to take a rest and regroup for 2024 and just find the spark that he had in the beginning of 2023 and bring that back.
And I think he'll find that. I think with young players, I think you're going to have little peaks and valleys. And this, if I were his coach, this would be the learning experience of like, okay, you've dealt with success. Now you're dealing with some adversity. And it's like anything. If you're in the middle of a match and your serve goes away and you have to find your game again, he's just doing it in like a bigger sense on tour of like, hey, I got to find myself again. And he's so talented and has such a joy and a love for the game that I think he will find it again. But I think he needs some rest. I think he needs to get his head right. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that if he loses this match, and it looks like he's going to, then that alone will clinch the #1 seed at the end of the year for Novak Djokovic, which I believe is the 8th time, which is just insane. And I was talking about this with Mark Woodforde in the previous segment about all the records that Novak's racking up. I mean, I think it's 41,000 level wins now or something insane like that. It's just, and this is just another candle on the cake to celebrate him as the greatest player ever. And for those that refuse to acknowledge that because they're passionate Federer fans or passionate Rafa fans, it is increasingly hard to argue with all the data and all the stats and all the wins that Novak not only has piled up, but as you just pointed out, continues to pile up. And it looks as if he's gotten a fresh breath and he's going to be a force to be reckoned with for the foreseeable future. So yeah, it will be interesting to watch how Alcaraz handles the rest of this match. And I'll let you know on the other side of this interview how it finishes up. But yeah, it's an interesting time for the once and future king, Carlos Alcaraz. Before I let you go, next week, I believe, now remember I've been sick, so I have my calendars off. Next week is Thanksgiving. Do I have that correct?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. It's good to know I've got the basics covered. What is your favorite item on the Thanksgiving table? I haven't had a chance to ask anybody else this. You're the only one I'm going to ask. What's your favorite item?
I go right to dessert. I make a killer apple pie with a walnut crust. And I have to tell you, I've been making it, since I was in college, and I've been away from college many, many years, Mark, let's just say.
2 or 3.
Yeah. And I eat 2 or 3 slices of that, and I have no guilt about it on that day. I mean, I like my turkey and my stuffing. It's your norm, but I go right for my walnut crusted apple pie.
I'm coming over for some of that. That sounds amazing. I love that.
Anytime.
And the word you said there, guilt-free. Everybody, listen, don't be a glutton, but enjoy yourself on Thanksgiving. Surround yourself with the people you love. Have some great things like that apple pie, which sounds amazing. And don't beat yourself up for it. Go for a walk the next day or something like that, but just enjoy the food, enjoy that moment. And now I'm going to go to bed.
Buy yourself a nice pair of fat pants. You deserve a nice pair of comfortable fat pants to eat all the apple pie that you want or whatever you like and watch football and then do online shopping. It is the day. It's one of my favorite holidays. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Mark, and everyone out there listening.
To you and to your family. And I am thankful every time I get to talk to you, Michelle. You are just the best. Thank you so much. Happy holidays to you. And I know I've talked about this with everybody else, and I'm pretty sure I've talked about it with you. I'm doing this on the air. We want to do the round table year end. Remember we did that, I think, the last couple of years. Are you on board for that?
Oh my God, it's a holiday treat for me. Of course I am.
Can't wait. That's so much fun. I know I'll be talking to you before then, but as I said, happy Thanksgiving. Thank you so much as always for coming on, and I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Okay, let me catch you up on that Alcaraz match against Zverev. He did indeed lose that match, and Novak won his first match over Holger Rune, so that means Novak will be the number one player in the world at year's end for the 8th time in his career, which is just astonishing. It really is amazing the kind of records he's putting up right now. And also, that apple pie that Michelle was talking about, that sounds pretty amazing. I think I might need to head over to her house for Thanksgiving. Well, that's going to do it for us today. So let me thank our sponsors, the USTA, for making this show possible. Let me also thank Mark and Michelle for coming on. Now, we'll be back on the other side of Thanksgiving. So let me wish everyone out there a wonderful holiday. I hope you all will be surrounded by the people you love and an amazing spread of food. And yeah, stretch pants might be a good idea too. Enjoy it, everyone. Be well, and we'll see you next time.